In this video, I'm going to talk about the grid and snap icons. So we've got down here in the status bar, we've got an icon here that shows the grid mode. Notice if I hover next to it, it says grid mode and it also says F7. So if you wanted to type it in, you could type the word grid mode, all one word, or for quick and easy access, you could press F7 on your keyboard and that'll turn it on and off. Just toggles between having it on and having it off. So there's the grid. Now the grid has major lines every 5. It has minor lines. I'm not sure if you can see that, but there's really faint kind of thin lines in here. And we can also turn on our snap. Now this is not the same as the O snap. We'll be talking about O snaps, and that's a really big thing that we use. Typically we do not use snaps. We generally keep snaps turned off, and I'll explain why in just a moment. So to make changes to these, to change the settings, notice there's the grid, the snap, and then there's a little button here that is a down arrow. I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to check or select the word that says snap settings, and this pulls up my drafting settings. So each one of these tabs we'll cover in a separate video, but right now we're just going to talk about snap and grid. So grid, again, F7, it's on right now. It's got a check mark next to it because I can see the grid. Notice the snap, I had turned it on, then I turned it off. So F9 will turn that on or off. You can put a little check mark next to it here if you'd like. And what this is going to do is, first we'll talk about the grid. So we're going to come through here, and there's different stuff that you can change about the grid. So we can change the X spacing and the Y spacing on the grid. Right now we see a grid line at every ½ inch. So it's set at 0.5 on the X and 0.5 on the Y. Then we tell it we have a major line every 5. So every grid that you see, every line that you see on there is ½ inch. Adaptive grid is something that showed up, I don't know, probably 10 years ago now. And what adaptive grid does is when I come back into my drawing and notice how I start to zoom out and I can still see that major line, I zoom out again, it's getting smaller and smaller. When it gets too small, it jumps. Did you see how it got bigger? Now it's going smaller, 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 it got bigger. That is adaptive grid. So it is really, it's a little bit scary, it's a little bit dangerous, that adaptive grid. So because that adaptive grid is checked by default, it is important that you know you cannot just count the grid. This is not like using grid paper. As it gets too small, the screen adjusts itself so that that major line stays visible and those grid lines stay visible. So now each one of those lines is not 0.5, it's a kind of a fraction of that 0.5. So also grid display beyond limits. So we used to have to set up our drawing limits, and the drawing limits would tell us everything inside within those limits, which is basically about our page size. We would set our limits. We would set the lower left corner to 0, 0, and we would set the upper right corner to whatever our page size was. If it was an A size sheet of paper, we might set it to 12 along the X and 9 along the Y, so that it's big enough for an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. But right now, display beyond the limits is another thing that it does by default, and that means this grid just goes forever. As far as you can pan and zoom, you're going to see this grid going on forever. No matter what our limits are set to, it displays beyond those limits. So this is the grid. Now if we come over here to snap, what snap is going to do is it's going to, as I'm drawing an object, it's going to kind of force my line, for example. If I'm drawing a line, it's going to force my line to only go in these increments. And so it's set up to be 0.5, which perfectly aligns with my grid. But you'll see, I'll come back into the drawing and show you what happens. Now it does have this checked to have equal X and Y spacing. If for some reason you didn't want to snap it in equal spacing along the X and the Y, you can check that. And in here for snap type, we are going to have grid snap. That's what's on by default, and we have rectangular snap. Later on in chapter 7, we're going to learn about isometric drawings, and we will change ourselves to isometric snap. But for now, we're going to leave it at that, and I'll say OK. Now I'm going to kind of zoom in double click there we go. I'm going to zoom in a little bit and I'm going to start the line command. And notice how as I'm moving my mouse around, do you see how my mouse is jumping? That cursor is just jumping. That's because I have my snap on. So remember I told my snap I only wanted to go in increments of 0.5. So right now it's lining up with that grid. So if I wanted to start, I could click somewhere to start and then I can pull it out and it's just jumping to the next increment. Notice I'm going to zoom in a little bit. I cannot go in between these even if I tried. It's only forcing me to be right at that 0.5 grid. This is one of the reasons that we typically don't draw with our snap-on. If this happens to you, almost 9 times out of 10, I'll have a student call me over and they're like, I don't know what happened to my mouse. It's just jerking around and it's real frustrating and I can't draw the way I want to. They just accidentally turned on their snap. So if you hit F9, turns it off, and then I can smoothly draw anywhere that I need to go. So that's it. That is your grid and snap in AutoCAD.